Expelled students of Reddit. What was the reason for your expulsion? Story 1. I went to a private Christian university, and I have a friend who got expelled for supposedly exorcising a demon out of someone in the middle of a wide open courtyard. Story 2 wasn't my expulsion. Due to my Catholic high school was trouble, long line of disciplinary infractions. Final straw was that a friend of his got a new car, so he decided to off on it. The senior parking lot was a busy social scene before and after school. People would arrive around 30 minutes early and hang around their cars. Couples would have a pre-class makeout, folks would chat, etc. So this guy, in front of all of us, pulled his pants down to his knees and began beating his baloney. It was funny for the first 3 seconds or so, then it became clear that this guy was going to finish the job. Came all over the headlight. Some girls made disgusted sounds. Some guys laughed. Most people were just sort of in shock in having witnessed that. Dude was gone by the end of the day. Announcement that afternoon to all students that he was no longer permitted on school premises, to include the parking lot, and no one was to permit him entry to our buildings. He's a podiatrist now. Story 3. Can I answer by proxy with a story? My high school was one of those high schools where we have a cop who just kind of chills at the one busy hallway intersection, presumably to deal with drugs or fights or some. One day a kid was acting out. I wish I knew the full details, but all I knew was he started some kind of altercation or fight and the cop stopped him. The kid was said something like, "You better get your hands off me," and of course the cop did not get his hands off him. The kid headbutted the cop and disoriented him, then just beat the out of him and hospitalized him. That kid obviously got expelled. We got a new cop for our school, and I'm pretty sure that kid is still in jail because I think he was 18, so he didn't even get tried like a minor. This was an extraordinary story. My school was not usually this bad. We had a lot of potheads and a fight every now and then, but that was about it. Story 4. Not me, but my brother got expelled for using a vocabulary word correctly in a sentence. For context, it was not that long after Columbine, and people were overreacting to every little thing. My brother was not a bad kid, but was a bullied kid with a smart mouth. He had a history of making threats. He once told another kid he was going to eat his grandchildren. Long story short, it was English class, and the teacher called on him and asked him to use the word retribution in a sentence. He said something to the effect of, "I will have retribution on those who have wronged me." School took it as a threat, and with his past record, he was expelled. Story 5. Was watching in the back of the class with a couple of mates. We were 14 and it was religion period. Halfway through the volume randomly went up and you could hear me daddy while the teacher was reading Quran. Story 6 happened to my best friend. In marching band in high school we all sat at the same cafeteria table. At the end of it, someone punched someone in the shoulder and said, "Pass it on." And down the side of the table you get punched in the shoulder, you turn to the person next to you, punch them and say, "Pass it on." My friend across the table was just playing the game and punched the kid next to him. We are in high school, mind you. This kid starts crying, and I mean crying really hard. Lunch is over and he runs to the assistant principal and tells him. The principal gets involved and the punched kid's parents come in at the end of the day demanding my friend be expelled. The assistant principal interviews some of us from the table, and I said we were all playing and nobody punched anybody hard. He didn't buy it. Friend got expelled for 120 days. Had to reapply back to the school at the next school year, and when he did was put on academic suspension, which meant any screw-ups, and he was permanently expelled from the school district. As for punched kid, I read a news article a couple years later where his father beat up his mother on Christmas Eve over his mistress. Story 7. While reading some of these reasons I'm realizing that a lot of people at my Catholic high school should have been expelled. We had a dance once and the lights had to be turned on and the dance stopped because 2 kids were having on the dance floor. The girl was a teacher's daughter. Also a friend of mine puked on my principal's desk because she was so drunk, and another girl in the girls' bathroom sink. Oh, and another guy punched his GF and a random dude because they were dancing together. All of these people only got suspended for a few days. It also all occurred during dances, and somehow the school still continues to have dances. Story 8. Lightsaber battle. My friends and I arranged a giant lightsaber battle on the last day of my sophomore year of high school. It was a huge hit with the students, but the faculty wasn't thrilled. Being a private school, they felt it hurt their image and singled me out as the ringleader. On my first day back after the summer I was put on academic probation and expelled about a week later for profanity. Went to public school for my junior and senior year. Totally worth it. Edit spelling formatting. What can I say? I went to public school. Story 9. My friend and I stole a girl's reading book, singeing the edges of the cover so it would look like lost pirate booty, and hid it in the art room. Then we used 3 rolls of masking tape to create a 3D spiral maze of stickiness that crisscrossed the room, and gave the girl a singed-edged pirate map to locate her book. She rolled her eyes at us, clambered through the tape maze, and retrieved her book, calling us dorks and laughing. However, a teacher discovered the taped-up art room before we had a chance to take it down. My friend and I were called to the principal. I figured we were going to get in some trouble to wasting tape, or possibly suspended for using a lighter inside school. Nope, the principal explained that we had engaged in burning books, which was a Nazi behavior. When we tried to explain how our edge singing was merely decorative, she argued that any non-Nazi interpretation was obviously a lie, because she had seen with her own eyes very clearly that we had used masking tape to create a giant swastika in the art room. A swastika? No, it's just a big vortex of tape. It's, a maze. This wasn't a final straw type situation. Neither my friend nor I had ever done anything before that could be somehow construed as Nazi positive. we had no interest in Nazis, weren't currently studying Nazis, and had no sympathy for Nazi thought. We had, however, neglected to know much about the book we'd taken from the girl. She was in a different English class than we were, and was reading a book we didn't know. It turned out to be Night by Elie Wiesel, a first-person account of living through the Nazi Holocaust, so from our point of view we were screwing around, wasting tape and being silly pirates. But from the principal's point of view we had desecrated a book about the Holocaust, and created a giant masking tape swastika in the art room. Oh, and the girl we had stolen the book from, she was Jewish, so was the principal. We were subjected to a long, uncomfortable monologue about the horrors the principal's family had suffered trying to escape the Holocaust. At the end of it we made the appropriate noises of shock and contrition, and once again tried to explain how it really was a big misunderstanding, and that our actions were certainly dumb and irresponsible but not anti-Semitic. But the next thing that happened was we were walked to our lockers and told to empty them. Our parents were called to pick us up. We were no longer welcome on the school property. The Board of Education would assist us in trying to find new placement at different schools so we could complete the 8th grade elsewhere. So that's why I was expelled, the one and only time in my life I was ever accused of being an accidental Nazi. Edit. I've also never been a Nazi on purpose, either, so don't get any funny ideas. Edit Spellem. Story 10. I skipped school for sports day to study for university entrance exams. Got expelled from school in my final month for doing this. It suited me fine, more time to cram. Story 11. Coffee in middle school. It all started with this one kid, I'll call her Becky. Her mom drove her to school every day, and her mom bought her Starbucks. She'd share it with her friends, giving the sips. It was one of those real sugary specialty drinks that masked most of the coffee flavor. Becky and her friends were pretty popular, and as they went so did the school. It became a hip thing to come to school with a coffee. Didn't matter if it was Starbucks, Tim's, Dunkin' or even McDonald's. If you had coffee when you walked into school you were cool. It was actually pretty funny seeing kids trying to swig down bitter coffee to fit in. When it really caught on though, the administration noticed, concerned about the health problems, and someone potentially getting burned coffee became banned. The thing was, at this point everyone was addicted. Kids were sluggish, getting caffeine withdrawal headaches and becoming miserable. I was in a unique position of being the only student on the school webpage club with a first period study hall. I would pop my head into homeroom, say I'm here, then head to the clubroom to update the webpage watch launchcast video on an unblocked computer. The clubroom was basically a few computers in a room connected to the East Wing teacher's lounge. Nobody used that lounge though, as the West Wing was only like 3 years old and had a brand new lounge with new furniture and a TV. Anyways, all that is to set the background for the suspension. The old teacher's lounge had a coffee vending machine in it. 50 cents for what I now realize was crappy instant coffee. I saw my opportunity. I'd have my friends give me $1 and their order. I'd sneak into the lounge, get them a cup, and once they got a bathroom pass, they'd swing by and pick up their coffee. We were smart and used cans from the juice vending machine. Soda had been banned, but we had a Minute Maid machine. Like Icarius though, I got too bold. I would go to second period with my can of coffee. The jig was up when my arm got bumped and I spilled hot coffee all over my crotch. I held my tongue from screaming and was wearing camo cargos, so that teacher didn't know, but third period was gym, and it was penis inspection day, so coach noticed the redness. I failed penis inspection for the 3rd time that year and got suspended for a week. Story 12. I had to go before the school board to see if I was going to get expelled, but they decided not to. I sold a bunch of caffeine pills to my friends for $25 apiece and they were all worried about drugs. They even sent them off to be tested. Story 13. Try this on for a size. A friend of mine got suspended from school for reading the Chronicles of Narnia during lunch break. The reason given by the dickwad teacher: you're not supposed to read any other books except the courseworks during school hours. Also these novels books are not going to help you in your career at all. Story 14. Okay, so it wasn't me that got expelled, but a week ago a good mate of mine decided that he and 2 other mates were going to smoke weed at school. At first everyone told them how stupid that is and such. Sadly we only convinced one of them not to do it. But the thing is, everyone thought they were going to do it in the bushes so no one sees them, but like dumb fucks they do it in the bathrooms right outside security cameras and people smelt it and they got caught. One of them is expelled for possession and other suspended for use. Story 15. I went to a Christian school with a strange learning system from CFIF. They used the Accelerated Christian Education program to teach students. There were no teachers, just supervisors and monitors. The supervisors and monitors went through a 1-week course to get their jobs. Students basically taught themselves through workbooks. If you didn't understand something, the supervisor or monitor would just refer you back to the section that taught you how to do it. This system didn't work for me because being left to myself made it impossible to pay attention. When you didn't do your work you were given demerits. After a certain amount of demerits you were given a 1-hour detention after school. The school also still used corporal punishment, so paddlings were a thing of which I'd gotten 2 or 3. After a good amount of a school year of having detention after school literally 5 days a week, not being allowed to have lunch with my classmates, and not being allowed to go to gym class, they saw it as a privilege. I was called into the office one day and was read the letter they'd be sending my parents that I was no longer a student at their school. They didn't call my parents to speak to them or ask them to come in. I had to tell my mother in the car after she picked me up that I'd been expelled. Story 16. Didn't happen to me, but my grandfather passed this along to me. I used to live in Germany, army brat, and the military considers dependents living overseas to be a privilege. Well, this kid had gotten into trouble during the day at school, and it escalated into a fight on the bus after school. The assistant principal attempted to break up the fight, and in the process the kid punched the assistant principal in the face. He was expelled from school and the military shipped him, his mother and siblings back stateside while the dad remained in Germany for the remainder of his tour. Story 17 pulled a knife on a girl who'd been bullying me and beating me up for nearly 2 years. After all attempts at intervention failed, I was in physical jeopardy every single day at school, and teachers literally watched me get my head slammed into lockers and did nothing. My clothes were stolen during PE and I had to go to class in my dirty gym uniform. I was shoved downstairs. The vice principal gave my parents lip service. The parents of the girl who was my worst bully said I was making it up. Cops. This was the 80s. The cops didn't care about school bullies. So I threatened this in front of a large number of students that I would stab her in the throat if she ever touched me again. I got expelled. Then my mother threatened to sue the entire school district and the vice principal personally. My mother was not a woman to be with, and she managed to get them to reverse the expulsion and only put me in in-school suspension for 10 days. The school still wouldn't move my locker or change my classes, but that girl didn't with me again. No one did for the rest of the school year because they thought I was crazy, so at least that worked. Story 18 Not me, but 2 guys were expelled from my high school. One of them was for cutting off someone's ears while he was asleep. He tied fishing line around each ear, tied the line tightly to something next to the bed, then made a loud noise so the guy would jump up quickly. The other guy was expelled for setting the dorms on fire while we were asleep. Story 19 I missed 27 out of 28 days in February due to severe depression from a combination of chronic health issues, family issues, being bullied in school, and not dealing with assault the year before. Every day I would cry on my way to school. So one day I just stopped going, but I would leave my house so that my parents would think I was in class. Eventually the school contacted my parents, and told them I could repeat my senior year or drop out. So I dropped out. Once I dropped out I was so much happier. Turns out it isn't normal to have a panic attack every day. I didn't realize what a toxic environment my school was until I didn't have to go anymore. I immediately got a GED so that I could get a BA, and my life isn't up in a significant way. Story 20 I swear I wasn't involved, but 2 people from my old school got expelled for breaking into the school building in the evening to smoke pot in there, and someone of the cleanup crew saw them, called the cops, and in the end, caused a helicopter searching for them as they ran into a near forest. True legends. Story 21 told this story a few times before, but here goes again. Only got expelled from 1 class, grade 12 English around end April, last class of the day, real close to end of high school. I was in the advanced class, but it was a small school and the collegiate class slightly less advanced curriculum, which meant they just read fewer books and their finals tests were a tad easier. We're doing presentations. Boring presentations on books we hadn't read. Most of the class was doing other girls were talking, jocks were throwing a Nerf football at one another, nerds were geeking out over some shit or other, but my stoner friend and I were quietly playing chess on a little magnetic board. For some reason, out of the chaos the teacher identified my friend and I to discipline. That. I lost my temper and asked him WTF his problem was. When compared to everyone else, we were quiet and peaceful. He got and sent my friend and I to the hallway to sit and not disrupt the class. 2 stoner best friends in the hallway with 50 minutes to go before next class. We got bored very quickly and started going through our pockets. He had a couple of joints in his wallet and I had free food coupons from a chicken place about a 10-minute walk away. He was hesitant, but I told him if we don't go now we won't have time to go at all. So we went, we get high on the way there, get the chicken and hurry back, about 5 minutes to spare before end of class. We start eating. Rying. Teacher comes out to let us go get our bags to go home. I have a drumstick up to my mouth, smile, reach the drumstick towards him. Chicken, he smiled. Of course he smiled, but he was annoyed enough to say he didn't want me or my friend in his class anymore. I used the free period to study for the finals coming up and had more than enough credits to graduate HS no problem French school. English was an elective. I could have gone and redone that class alone to get my bilingual diploma, but figured it, not worth it. My friend and I sneaked into main office to steal exams papers. We weren't caught that moment, but after writing the 6th paper that was mathematics, we just made a big mistake being so kind to let few friend know we are in possessing of maths paper 2 days before. They also gave it out and it somehow leaked. When people realized after the maths exams that the paper was leaked days before that, they got pissed and went spreading the news that the papers go leaked, so they staffed some investigation and we were sold out by those we were kind to. Story 22 The school held me back in kindergarten 1 year cause I wasn't ready for 1st grade yet apparently. When I actually got there they expelled me for already knowing how to read right, said I was disrupting the others in the class. Story 23 You know those antidepressants that you're not supposed to give to kids, because they increase the risk of suicide. Yep, I was on stressful day, resulted in an unsupervised detention, lame suicide attempt resulted in blowing the breaker to the room I was in and the room next door. Expelled as I was determined to be a liability to the school. Getting put in the bad kid school destroyed my life. I went from depressed and bullied, but with regular classes to being in a tiny class of only other depressives and bullies, and there was no art, music, science, pretty much nothing. We had reading and daily oral language start with a capital, end with a period. My teacher didn't know how to use a semicolon, and math minimum wage X hours worked paycheck. It was always minimum wage, always. Staff and teachers were a combination of nepotism and sadism. Entire families worked at the special ed school. The principal's son, for the short time he worked there, was the only person who knew enough math to teach pre-algebra. The assistant gym teacher moved to being one of the reading teachers. He liked provoking the kids with anger problems into swinging at him so he could press charges. He especially loved provoking the autistic girl into having fits. Ended up bouncing around a lot, but some things were the same everywhere. Staff were a combination of burnouts and sadists. Teachers responsible for high school education didn't know algebra, so they would find a book, blow the dust off the top exactly like a movie, hand it to you, and say start at the beginning. Nobody could teach you to use a semicolon. Science was never more than episodes of Bill Nye, or maybe an assistant who decided we could be trusted to iron leaves and wax paper, and if you weren't the plucky kid who forced someone to blow the dust off that pre-algebra book, math was always minimum wage times hours worked equals paycheck. Within the system I was considered to have no behavioral issues. However, I was not allowed back to mainstream because my school-assigned therapist said I didn't get along with my parents. I was a teenager. Half of all high schoolers wouldn't be allowed to go to school if that was the requirement. My therapist didn't give a. I eventually was allowed to transition back to mainstream, but it was too late. By moving out of special ed, I went from needing 12 credits to graduate to 50. My choice was to become the superest of super seniors, or get my GED. One of my exes graduated from an Ivy League school. When she practiced vocab for her GRE exams, she was a little upset to learn her GED boyfriend had a better vocabulary than her. But here I am with a GED, you'll probably never complete a higher level of learning. I did not have a good childhood leading up to my expulsion, but I might have gotten past it. The day that I was left alone, having a breakdown while on drugs that make kids suicidal, that day changed the rest of my life. Story 24. Bringing like 0.01 of a gram to school in the 7th grade and letting my friends see it. He got caught with it and was expelled since he was in possession of it. I came forward and claimed responsibility and took the consequences. Story 25. ITT that would only get you detention in an American public school. Skipping class. Seriously, our school had a stupid rule about how short your hair could be. I had it at the shortest that was allowed 3 all over, and a bald teacher said your hair's too short. My response: you can talk. I wasn't expelled but suspended for 2 months. I didn't know what alopecia was at the time. Story 26. I made a throwaway joke the day after the Columbine shooting in my French class 2 ND period class. When a bunch of were talking about it, someone I had considered a friend jokingly told the teacher he was scared. She said she didn't hear it and wasn't going to do anything. I got called down to the principal's office at the end of the day and got grilled by her and the vice principal. They even dimmed the lights in her office to make it like an interrogation room. Apparently the school district had rolled out a wonderful zero-tolerance policy during the day and I was to become the first victim. I couldn't even remember the joke at the time. It was years later before I really tried to remember the joke, which I was prompted with, "Are you gonna shoot up the school?" Which I replied, "Oh sure, you'll drive my tank here tomorrow and blow everyone up with my bazooka," and that is why I repeated my freshman year. Story 27. Got sent to alternative school my junior year for having a flask of rum in my car. Funny thing is they only searched me because it was 420 and there were reports of students coming in high, but they didn't even find my stash. Story 28. My friend asked me if I could hold on to his THC carts until the end of the day. I'm dumb AF, but I didn't want him to get caught with them, so I did it. Long story short, my administrator came into my classroom a few periods later and asked to administer a search. I said no, but they called my parents and my parents said that they could. I shouldn't have held on to them, but I honestly think that being expelled was a little harsh. Story 29. My teacher asked me if I did an assignment. I told her I didn't know. She said that wasn't a real answer. So I said yes. Turns out I didn't. So they expelled me. This memory problems along with multiple other disciplinary actions were caused by symptoms of my chronic illness. It took the expulsion, and my parents seeing my symptoms firsthand, for everything to click. I tried going back to the school later, to ensure that what happened to me will never happen again, to make certain that kids would not be punished for their illnesses, but helped and encouraged towards a diagnosis and accommodations. I pointed out the high rate of suicide at their school directly linked to their lack of response when students are in pain, and pleaded with them to work with me to find a solution, to ensure the safety of all of their children. They weren't interested. Story 30. Went to a very preppy Protestant all-boys school. 9 kids were kicked out of my year. 9 were Jewish. The principal at the time was let go not long after. Story 31. TLDR, not me but a friend of mine was suspended for unknowingly creating a prostitution ring at his former school, then expelled for turning another student gay. Edit. Hey race the story. I didn't have enough time to write it down because I was outside. We're talking about something that happened by late 2014 early 2015 if my math is correct. So there was this friend of mine, I didn't know him at the time, who was an 8th grader at a private school back in Mexico's. In Mexican as well. This friend of mine, who I will name Bob, used to be kind of A and an AW as virtually every teenager at some point, and would say that he did drugs, which he did but not to the extent he claimed, and that he was an inexpensive dealer. He was not. The word spread and people started to ask him for weed. At first, Bob would just go and buy the weed with a local dealer and then resell it. However, the dude couldn't keep with the demand and tried to look for alternative sources to keep the price cheap. He somehow managed to squeeze some extra weed from a bunch of friends of his. What Bob didn't know is that some of them were getting a lot of weed in exchange for their nudes and/or with other students. After some time, another group of students in the same school learned about his involuntary scheme and decided to imitate it. Someone told the principal about this after a couple of months, and incredibly enough my friend Bob only got suspended for 2 months or so. Shortly after his suspension ended, he invited this other male student, who was really homophobic, to his house, and they ended up having. My friend told his class about this exploit, and the student's mother got really mad and ranted to some random teacher about how Bob had turned her son gay. Due to the prostitution mess, Bob had a really bad reputation, and the school expelled him to prevent another weird situation like the previous ones from happening. Story 32. I went to public school, so expulsion meant being moved to a different school in the district. In 8th grade, a girl was expelled from a different middle school and moved to mine for coming to school high multiple times. She continued to do it even after she was moved. Story 33. Not me but a buddy, worked the tech crew for the drama department. They gave him a Leatherman to use for the project. A few days later he is called into the office and asked if he had it on him. He said, yeah, here it is, expelled. Story 34. A page-long letter was written about absurd axiom involving dogs and such that would be performed with a substitute teacher in mind. Said letter was then left on the substitute teacher's desk to be found. My name was signed on said letter. The fact it was not in my handwriting or that my name was spelled incorrectly never factored into the equation. Story 35. My teacher accused me of cheating on a paper I wrote. She had no proof, but no one believed that I wrote it. They said I wouldn't be in trouble if I just told them who wrote it for me, but since I did write it I had nothing to tell them but the truth. Story 36. This was 2000, my senior year. I had gotten into the rave scene somehow and was doing dumb like dropping acid before school or taking I guess you kids call it Molly now. I was also a candy kid with the pacifier necklaces and colorful clothing, and so it was pretty easy to look at me and think, hey, he might be on all the drugs. One day I'm sitting in art class with, for some reason, 25 gel tabs in the secret pocket of my jacket. I get called to the office and I'm walked there with a security guard. I hop in the go-kart, and as he's driving to the main building I, for whatever reason, move the baggie with the gel tabs from my secret pocket to my sock. I get to the office and principal asks me if I'm on drugs. I tell him no. Keep in mind, despite looking like an outlandish idiot teenager, I've never been in trouble before, so I had no idea how to react really. He asks me to empty my pockets. I comply, nothing incriminating there. Then he asks me to reach into my socks. I do that for him and try to avoid the baggie, but it makes a crinkling sound and I'm busted right then and there. My dad was on an important business trip and gets the call that his pride and joy has just been found at school with 25 hits of acid. Luckily I was 17 and had never been in trouble before that. I got unsupervised probation until I was 18. It also helped that underneath the appearance I really was a sheltered little lamb and played it off like some guy gave me these drugs at a party and I had no idea what they were. Still don't know how I got off so easy. Anyway, they never did check that secret pocket in my jacket. It was built into the hem on the left side and was velcroed shut. Impossible to see. Wonder what my life would have been like had I never been caught. It led to a huge meltdown in family life, years of distrust and anger, etc. etc. Lot of things would have been different immo. Oh well, making out in the hallway, 2-week suspension, more like 2-week vacation. I sat home and played video games. LOL, my parents were called and they just laughed in the principal's face because they don't see anything wrong with it. Story 37. We were having a food day my freshman year of high school in English class. I took it upon myself to order a 5-pound bag of sugar-free gummy bears off the internet. I brought them in and everyone had some. The class ended up eating the whole bag and went about their day. Later in the day, just about all the bathrooms in the school were filled and some people were standing in line clenching their stomachs. Needless to say, the administration got pretty pissed that I brought them in even though there was nothing inherently wrong with bringing in gummies for a food day. Multiple people were on the toilets for almost an entire class period, and the stories people were spreading indicated that the gummies had rather strong effects on their bowels. I got called down to the office the next day and had my chewed about what I laced those gummies with. The school resource officer demanded that I tell him what kind of poison or drug I put in them. I told them that it was just sugar-free gummy bears, but they didn't believe me. I was threatened with lawsuits, but nothing ever came of it. In the end I was expelled, and I only hope they feel like after the reviews spread around the internet. Story 38. I only remember watching 2 people in my high school get expelled. I remember this 14-year-old kid in foods class picked up a butcher knife, pointed it at the teacher and speed walked towards her. Her face was obviously pure terror. Then he stopped right before her and said, "Nah, I'm just playing," shrugged, then put the knife down. He never came back, oddly enough. He's 24 today and probably the nicest guy Eve ever met. The other kid I remember got expelled for farting really loud, and I guess that was just the teacher and principal's last straw. Story 39. Not me but my girlfriend. Her father got cancer and she got a letter from the school that she couldn't continue there and would be expelled because as far as they would assess her character, she couldn't handle all of that. Story 40. Got bullied a ton in school. Kids in my wedding class in high school dropped fly wheels on me, lit me on fire, swung metal grinders at me and everything. One week they started taking stuff out of my lunch while I was working on stuff, so I got a lock for my backpack. That week they went to a principal and said I had a gun in my backpack. They searched my locker, backpack, everything, no gun. They barred the doors and locked me in a room for a while. Had to ask to go to the nurse because someone beat me up earlier. Was told to sit there and wait. They had a hearing at the school district to expel me. My parents got a lawyer and the district's lawyer halfway through got up and screamed, "You did what?" and walked out. I still got expelled because of the zero tolerance policy though. Got homeschooled, graduated and got into college a year and a half ahead of everyone in my old high school. Everyone involved had to take an early retirement. One guy quit after the hearing to get away from it. 2 years after that they had a kid bring in 2 AKs and some sort of pistol he hid in some trash cans around campus. Kid got 2 weeks in school suspension. I think he wanted miniskirts to be mandatory school uniforms or something. Story 41. Some kid broke into our school one night and he spread seeds all over the floor and he left windows open, and in the morning the place was infested with birds. Story 42. I didn't get expelled but I got in trouble for 6 weeks. In 9th grade I had some kid shove my tasty cake into the side of my head at lunch, so I had bits of all over my face and in my hair. Some also ended up on the table. The principal came over when he noticed the commotion made by my table and told me to clean up the mess. I stared at him, motioned to the side of my face and asked him why I had to clean it up when I very clearly wasn't the person who made it. Remember, stuff is all over the side of my face. My table even backed me up on this and pointed to the kid who did it. He was still standing next to me. Principal said if I didn't get up and clean the mess that was made I would get a week of lunch detention for each time counted. He got to 6 before I got up. The other kid didn't get in any trouble.